how did you balance the perks and traits system in Fallout New Vegas? It really adds a level of depth to the character creation that we haven't seen before.
Well, you see, Corey, perks are like children. All of them are special, but some are naturally more gifted than others. The only real penalty is that it's hard to pick your favorites.
That's really insightful. Thank you. Okay. So how did Obsidian approach the process of making Fallout New Vegas? I know there was some original work created for the Van Buren project. Did any of that make its... What? What's wrong? What? I'm just preparing for my Fallout interview with Josh Sawyer.
There's nothing unusual going on here at all.
I'm sorry about that. So tell me, what was it like working with Ron Perlman? RPGs. Everybody loves the RPGs. Roll some dice and give me some Cheeto. I don't know.
That was beautiful, Corey.
Thank you.
Let's just get into it.
It's just right there. Just open right there. I'm working on this
list
top
of the
25
best Cheetos.
RPGs list. I'm working on this list of top Cheeto bags. No, I'm making this list of top 25 role-playing games.
Of all time.
Of all time.
On the PC.
And it's not easy to do that because there actually turns out a lot of really good role-playing games.
But
so,
Corey, what is a role-playing game?
That's what that's what I want to ask you guys, because like we've talked about some games that belong on this list supposedly, and some of them aren't traditionally role-playing games.
It's hard to make a list to begin with, but I think the hardest thing about making the list is defining the exact criteria of what really makes a game an RPG.
Do you include MMOs? If you're going to include co-op RPGs, why not include an MMO?
Because MMOs are a different, totally different type of game. So
but
those are right out. That could be a separate
They
list.
are totally RPGs, though. They are role-playing games. And
from that definition, like Mario Brothers is a role-playing game. Because you're playing as an Italian fat plumber, and
it is.
Most of us are not
it
that.
Is.
So like laying
favorite.
some criteria, I think, is really important for this.
So ground rules, MMOs are RPGs, but we just consider that a totally separate category.
Right.
So we're not throwing those in there. One of the games that I had on my list to be considered for inclusion was BioShock.
Right.
And you told me that's not an RPG.
Yeah, I don't think that's an RPG. Would you like to defend?
So I'm willing to concede and not have it on the list because the stuff we talked about earlier, saying why is it or is it not an RPG, you kind of can customize your character in BioShock the way you approach the game, the kinds of buffs and abilities you have, whether you're going to go like be a dude with a wrench who just gets 200% crit damage hits on people from the back and like shocks them, or you can focus on weapons and stuff, but you're not really like working your way through a skill tree that is a defined path. You can kind of just mix and match and grab all the abilities by the end of the game.
Yeah.
So you're not really ever forced into some kind of specific character customization when you have all the options available to you. So in that sense, it's more like these are just the powers that you have at your disposal in the game.
There's no real character progression there. And I'd also add that the decisions that you're making with your character like just are surface level there, and you're making no decisions that affect the story really. Like there's a few binary decisions that you make that ultimately don't impact the game there.
So the tough line is finding where a game with RPG elements, which is like every game,
kind of
becomes a game that is you can classify as an
Borderlands.
RPG.
Yeah, Borderlands is a really good example. I don't know if I'm gonna count it for this.
For me, the distinction is mechanical. Like to me, an RPG, like going back to D&D, it's about your character stats, and you make decisions about how your character deals with a situation, but ultimately you roll to find out. Whereas in something like Borderlands, I feel like there's a lot of reliance on player skill as opposed to character skill.
I would absolutely consider Borderlands an RPG.
I think it's close.
I think I count it as an action RPG,
which I think should be on. I think those should be on this list because Diablo is an action RPG.
So I'm torn on Diablo because Diablo fits a lot of those molds for me. And I wonder how much of that is because of the fantasy setting versus the sci-fi setting. But at the same time, Mass Effect 2 is
Clearly an RPG.
definitely an RPG, even though it happens to have a lot more action than like Knights of the Old Republic.
And
yeah,
if you
that's another one where there is some shooting, although
Knights of the Old Republic or Mass Effect?
no, Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're progressing a character down specific skill paths. You're having dialogue with your companions and making interesting choices that will affect how the story plays out.
I think that dialogue stuff is the real clincher for Mass Effect, because if you compared Borderlands and Mass Effect 2 in terms of the skill trees and the way you gain abilities and the way you do crit damage versus enemies and all that stuff, Borderlands is more of an RPG than Mass Effect 2, just based on those systems, I think. Because Mass Effect 2 really simplified the way you you went through tiers of powers for your character and stuff. Like, it's very simple compared to the first game. So I feel like for this list, you need to be lenient enough to allow action RPG games that are a little borderline in there. So the number one game on my list is also definitely in the action RPG category, maybe less traditionally an RPG, and that's Dark Souls 1. And it's combat-wise, it's very much like an action game in that, I mean, not so much like Devil May Cry where you're doing awesome combos, but it's an action game in that you're timing, single button presses to your attacks, and the way you think of those attacks, it's much more actiony. You need to be thinking about timing and when you're blocking and when you're attacking and understanding how different weapons works. But there's no dice roll happening when you do your attacks. Weapons have very set stats and behaviors, but so much of that game is about discovering the story of the world, and you do influence that in kind of subtle ways if you try to, the way you interact with the NPCs and you see their stories unfold or not unfold because you didn't talk to them enough, and even some decisions you make can kind of affect how the story plays out by the end of the game.
There's also some very important character building and character progression in that game.
Going in, the stats in that game are super, super deep,
Right.
and almost impenetrable, but learning them is incredibly rewarding.
Sure.
So that's a game you can play like on that deep kind of systems mechanical level and enjoy it as much as you would just interacting with the environments and the characters.
Okay, so we're making some decisions here on what the criteria for a role-playing game is. It's not just Baldur's Gate. It could be anything with dialogue decisions, anything with stats and character progression. It could be science fiction, or it could be fantasy, or it could be modern day.
I mean, I guess one of the things you can do, which I do when I think of lists a little bit, is you're looking for the 25 best RPGs. So you want the 25 games that are best for their RPG elements. They're best because they might be other kinds of things. They might kind of mix genres, but, I mean, when we've decided lists in the past, we decided that we couldn't put Deus Ex in best shooter because it wasn't good for its shooting. That wasn't the reason it was good.
It's a really good point.
Was good.
You're still feeling through the list. What are the games right now you think are definitely going to be on there, and what are the ones that are still on the fence?
Sure. I know that Planescape Torment will be on the list. I know there will be a representative from the Fallout series. I'm thinking maybe like Fallout 2, possibly Fallout New Vegas. I think there's a lot to love there. There will be an Elder Scrolls game on the list, though. There are a couple of interesting choices to make there. I think Deus Ex will be on the list over Human Revolution for sure.
Is Corey Banks an RPG?
I think Corey Banks is an RPG. I think it's probably Corey Banks 3.5.
I don't know. I think Corey Banks has RPG elements, but I don't know if I'd call him an RPG.
There's some weak dialogue, to be sure. But there's a lot of character progression if you just stick around.
We should probably get out of here and let you actually work on this list under the condition that you let Tyler and I write the entry for Corey Banks 3.5 on the list.
Great.
Yeah, not Corey Banks 4.0, just 3.5.
You're definitely going to be like the 25th best RPG, though.
So I wanted to start first before we talk about Pillars of Eternity and kind of pick your brain about Fallout, because New Vegas is such an interesting entry into that series. How did you guys start working on it?
Well, it all started with, I think, Fergus talking to Bethesda about working on something with them. Obviously, a lot of us from Black Isle were interested in working on something Fallout related. They had the IP. and they wanted to have something that filled. They were working on, well, they had finished working on Fallout 3. They were going to work on Skyrim, but they didn't want the Fallout license to have a very long gap before the next installment. So we talked to them about making sort of like a side story in the Fallout universe that they had sort of rebooted.
How much stuff did you actually pull? Because I know Black Isle had worked on a Fallout 3 concept called Van Buren.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that ended up into New Vegas and at least what you pitched?
Not much of what we pitched. We went back to it when we started actually developing the content. None of the story stuff is the same. It's all a completely new story that was developed by John Gonzalez, who was one of our narrative designers at the time. And every once in a while we were just like, oh, you know what, that was a kind of a fun idea for an area or a quest that we had earlier. Like Vault 22 was based on some of the old ideas of the Diana Vault that we had in the Van Buren design docs. But yeah, it was pretty much a brand new story. It's just every once in a while we're like, oh, you know what, we did design something kind of cool before. Let's see if we can bring that back in this title.
One of the things that I love about New Vegas is how it takes the Fallout 3 formula from Bethesda and expands on it so much. Was that something that the team knew that they wanted to do from the beginning?
Well, I mean, it wasn't like we were going to redesign the entire game. So we kind of
But it definitely felt like you were putting a lot of the old Fallout mechanics and expandability and like the traits and perks, for example, feel much more so in New Vegas as if there are definitely trade-offs. Like you're going to get a pro out of this, but there's definitely a con.
Yeah, I always liked stuff like that. I think as long as the con is not super penalizing to the player, as long as it's kind of a minor effect, it's really great for flavor. So we wanted to bring traits back. This is a neat thing to kind of play with for how you define your character. And then with the perks, it's very important for me as a designer in all the games that I design system mechanics on, that the abilities, the perks, the things that you pick, you feel like they're meaningful and there's a strong trade-off to picking one versus another.
I just want to get this out of the way because you made an amazing super hardcore mod for New Vegas, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
Because it's my dream. I've never actually played through with this, but my dream is to someday actually
Give it a
make it
whirl.
all the way through. So talk to me about the JE mod.
That's just J.E. Sawyer. So,
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's not even J.E. Sawyer. It's just J. Sawyer. So it's just called J. Sawyer because at Obsidian, when we save our local files, we just use the developer's first initial and last name. So I'm like, this is just my local file. So it's the mod that I made just to kind of play around with the game. So when we made New Vegas, I realized that if we made it really severe and really punishing, a lot of the audience that had come to it from Fallout 3, which is not super challenging, they might have been really turned off. So I didn't want to go crazy with that stuff in the core game. I didn't think it was appropriate. After the game shipped, there were certain mechanical things where I'm like, I really would have liked it to be a little harder and more challenging. I'd like the trade-offs to be a little stronger. And also, frankly, there were just a lot of bugs that we never got around to finishing. It's a huge game. So I just started changing things locally on my machine at home. I used the same GEC that was released to everyone else. Yeah. And I just modified it locally. And it started off just being like, oh, here are some changes to kind of how armor works. I added damage resistance back in. I changed around some of the perks, fixed some bugs, rebalanced some weapons because I was like, oh crap, like yeah, this didn't quite work out the way I'd expected it to, so I kind of want to adjust it. So it was a comprehensive, low-key overhaul. It's mostly just like if you want to play a really challenging version of the game that doesn't really add content, it just kind of fixes stuff. And some of the content that was in the game but not really utilized, just make use of it, like some of the suits of unique armor and stuff like that never got used.
I mean, did you guys always know that you wanted to include mod support in the game?
Oh, I mean, it was unquestionable. I mean, Bethesda has always been really good about supporting modding. Oblivion, Fallout 3, Skyrim, they all have great mod support, and I think it's really cool. I think it's a great way for aspiring game developers to actually start getting into I mean, that's like one of the first things I recommend to anyone is just mod a game. Like, don't try to go out and learn C++ immediately and like try to make a game from scratch knowing
play
nothing.
With some tools that
just,
are already
just play
supposed
with
to
the
be
tools.
usable.
And the thing is, like, Bethesda's tools, they're really easy to use. They're great for modding. And for, I mean, even little things like if you want to go and you want to change how ammunition works, you want to go into Skyrim and make arrows fly faster or farther or whatever. It's really easy to jump in and do that. So for us, I don't think there was ever any question that we were going to release a GEC and support modding as much as we could with it.
Did you have to release it? I seem to remember it being a really almost compressed development schedule. Like the game just suddenly appeared and happened, and I've always heard that it was a little bit crunched for you guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was the longest development cycle I've ever, maybe I'm exceeding that now on Eternity, though, I don't know. It's the longest development cycle I've had on a shipped game, which is 18 months.
Okay.
Even from Black Isle, we've always been on very short development cycles. Icewind Dale 1 was made in 14 months. Icewind Dale 2 was made in 10 months.
Oh, wow.
So Fallout New Vegas was made in 18 months, and none of us had any experience with the engine before. None of us had worked with it, the technology, the code base, anything. So we really took a very serious look at how Bethesda did things and how they built things. And we didn't always build things the right way. I mean, sometimes like some of the things that people saw were like, why is this so weird? And it's like, we didn't quite do it the way it needed to be. But
Was that due to being a first-person perspective game?
Oh, it's just due to unfamiliarity with the engine. Like Bethesda's engine, you can build like huge environments. They're really cool. They're really dense with lots of stuff. But there are kind of these rules that you learn over time, like build them like this, don't build them like this. Build sightlines like this, don't build them like that. So 18 months is a pretty short crash course for building a world that is, as big as New Vegas's was.
As ambitious.
Yeah, we kind of knew like we couldn't really have a setting that was in any way noticeably smaller than Fallout 3. So we're like, well, we have to have a wilderness that is about the same size as Fallout 3. We have to have about this many areas. We have to have about this much density, or else people are rightfully going to say like, this is falling short. So we very aggressively set out to do that, and we just learned the tools as fast as we could, and wound up making a pretty darn huge game.
Yeah, it's huge. It's kind of the Fallout game to play now. Any chance you guys would ever go back to that franchise?
Oh, I'm sure we would. There's tons of stuff. I mean, I know Avalon loves making stuff in the Fallout universe. I'd love to go to other locations, either whether it's on the West Coast or just an entirely new location would be fun to do. I think there's lots of neat stuff you can do with post-apocalyptic settings, and Fallout has such a rich volume of lore in it now that there's a lot of neat stuff you can do with it.
Yeah, it's easily one of our favorite role-playing games of all time.
Cool.
Thank you for making it.
Thanks.
So, all right. So now we're playing Divinity Original Sin, which is
I want to just jump right into it.
so far
I've-
my favorite RPG of 2014.
I've played about 30 seconds of this, but you've been talking about it for like 2 weeks now.
Right.
And it sounds really awesome.
I'm hoping my 64 hours of experience so far will help translate to something that works for you.
You
'Cause we're-
basically spent our entire July 4th vacation playing this game.
I did.
So I want to know what's so great about it.
There's a lot, and I'm going to show you a couple of different things. So now the way that we've got the game set up right now, you and I are playing co-op, and Divinity Original Sin is designed to be played in co-op.
So that's kind of like the big deal about this game, is that it has like cool cooperative stuff where you're working together, but you can also kind of screw each other over or make decisions that the other person doesn't necessarily agree with, right?
Exactly. And part of that design process is that we can split up the party if we want to. So right now you're kind of running off your way. I'm running off mine. I've given you control of 2 characters. Scarlet, who is, in my game, expert marksman, focusing on just using her bow to do ranged attacks. And I've also given you control of Medora, who in my game is a very beefy 2-handed sword person. And don't walk too far up there.
Okay. I'm just going to follow you because I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, that's something that's really interesting, right? We could be in 2 separate areas of the world in this game and be off doing our own things. These guys up here look to me like the bad guys. It looks like, did you get pulled into combat?
Nope.
Okay.
I was thinking about shooting him with an arrow, though.
Why don't you just step up and talk to him?
Okay.
Just walk right up here, see what happens.
I can barter with him.
You can barter with them. You can barter with anyone in this game.
Except he just said he wanted to kill me.
Oh. Well, then you
So-
started a fight, and I was actually close enough that I'm into the fight as well. But we are flanking them a little bit.
I just shot that guy. Oh, I shot 2 guys with an arrow.
You did. I think you
one
did.
arrow.
I think you did the ricochet power.
How did I miss the guy in the middle?
Probably through,
I guess the angle wasn't quite right.
or maybe a die roll went really poorly for you. I have 8 action points to use, and so I'm gonna nudge my way up here. Just 2 action points, please. 3.4 meters. Walk my way up a little bit, and see if I can cast
Well, here comes the magic.
lightning bolt. And I didn't stun him,
That's
But I
not
did do
good.
some damage, and you'll see there's a puddle of blood there under him.
Oh, that hurt.
Yeah, the enemy gets to go now. That puddle of blood underneath that thug, which she just moved away from, that counts as water. And there are a lot of like elemental status effects that can affect combat in this game. So like if someone's standing in water and you hit them with lightning, they can get stunned. If someone's standing in fire, they'll get burned. If they're standing in oil and you throw a fireball, they'll catch on fire.
I've only got like 5 action points, so...
Yeah, because you are slowed right now.
And I want to save... I assume the skill points under here indicates
have-
how many points, action points those take to use.
But those
1, 2, 3,
numbers
4?
are your hotkeys. So
Oh, those
it'll
are
tell
just
you-
the hotkeys.
It'll tell you action points.
Oh, it
here.
uses 0.
You have an ability called Tactical Retreat. It'll cost
That uses
4 of your
4.
action points, but it'll let you get some serious distance.
Or I could walk away.
if you walk
and then
away,
fire.
So being near fire makes you warm, and that's actually going to make you more susceptible to fire attacks.
Oh,
You
Jesus.
take more damage, but it also means that it's harder to freeze you. Which we haven't
guess
encountered
that's
the
good.
magic user in this fight yet, so.
Scarlet is now warm.
Scarlet's now warming beside the fire. And I, with Jahan, I'm going to bring in just a little bit of help. Let's summon a pet spider.
Whoa.
So
That
spider
is large.
The spider has a spot in the turn order now. And the spider has just enough action points to get over here and do a critical hit. I'll save the rest of his points. And now the enemy goes. So I really like this part of the game because the turn-based combat is so incredibly well designed. Like it is a touch slow at first, but the environmental effects that can end up changing the entire course of a battle are really cool, and I like the strategy behind saving up your action points for bigger attacks later on down the line.
So is there just like a standard basic attack that is...
Yeah, if you just click on an enemy, you'll just hit them.
Oh, that would take 10 action points to get over to that guy.
Yeah,
Dang.
you should hit the thug that you knocked down.
Oh, that's right. Let's stab him.
So you're doing some serious damage. You did 64 normal damage, and then 10 water damage.
Fortunately, I can't stab him again.
Yep, so save those points.
So what I'm getting so far is that the combat in this game is really deep.
It is super deep, yes. It's really interesting sharing the battle decisions with you as well. And that's another thug
I mean, letting me
down.
make bad battle decisions?
No, that I can't count on what I'm going to be able to do with Scarlet, for example. Because a lot of times I could have these characters setting up for different combinations, and you and I, if we were playing, for hours and hours on end, would probably be communicating more about that. Like you could be throwing an oil bottle.
For
right?
sure. Probably should have just hit that guy. I would have done more damage.
Well, you knocked him down, so he's not going to get to go next turn. That's kind of cool. Only one
Ooh,
left.
Spider just totally ate that poor archer girl.
And that person is super weak.
He quaffed a potion, though.
Tid. Any game that uses the phrase quaff is pretty cool to me.
So Medora's stunned.
Take your shot.
Kablam. And one more. All right.
Great. So everyone's down. So now we have the staff. We've got some more experience. Let's go turn it in.
We gonna get a level up for doing that? Get some XP?
We've already gotten quite a bit of XP out of this so far.
We did just kill like 7 guys.
If you hit
Whoa, he
this
just
button
disappeared.
here,
It's teleport?
you can teleport to this north gate. And we're gonna go.
So are we still in like the first area of the game?
Yes.
Is this...
The first area in my playthrough took about 32 hours. So let's come in here and talk to the mayor. And why don't you come talk to him?
It's the guy behind the desk?
Yeah.
Can I talk to the couch instead?
You can sit on the couch if you really want to. So what it's telling me now is it's giving me the option to say, here it is, here's your staff, or this is a really great staff, I want to keep it. And
Well, duh.
I want to give him the staff.
Why would you not keep the staff? then you can kill people with
Do
it.
you want to keep the staff, or do you want to keep the relic?
Wait, is this guy senile?
He's a little senile, yeah. He's a little dotty in the
I'm not giving him a superpower magical staff.
But this is what we should do. Like,
Why?
Reason just makes sense. We swore to serve Cecil. We cannot
I didn't,
steal from one of
I
its
didn't swear to
officials.
serve Cecil. I swore to play an RPG and get a sweet staff.
Okay, well, you have some options for how you want to approach this argument.
Whoa. Okay, are we Rochambeauing now?
We are. This is how we're going to figure out what we're doing. Paper, rock, scissors.
Are we going to do
whoever-
it for real or in the game?
In the
'Cause we
game.
could do both.
In the game, we're doing.
All right.
So I'm going to make an option. You're going to choose an option.
Don't look at my screen. Oh.
I think you looked at my screen. I think that's what happened.
I did not.
And your charm is way better than my reason here, so I have to be a little bit careful.
Pretty much just owned you at rock, paper, scissors.
That did happen. If only there were a coconut monkey involved, that would make a lot more sense.
Oh, look what just happened again.
Really?
Wow.
So we're not gonna give him the staff.
No, I'm keeping that staff. Well, thanks for taking me through like a chunk from the beginning of Divinity. I think I have like a slight grasp of what the combat's like, so I'm gonna jump into it, customize my own characters, and see if I fail horribly or actually have learned something.
I think you're ready to play, man. Just jump in.
I hope so.
All right, Josh. Let's talk about Pillars of Eternity.
It's cool. You know basically
yeah, you
what
just
it
told me
is.
by saying it's cool.
All right. So it's a Kickstarter-backed project. We had 77,000 awesome fans that backed our vision of making a game inspired by the Infinity Engine games.
Right.
So the Infinity Engine games, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and Planescape Torment, and the sequels to the Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale games. And the three things that we really focus on are exploration of beautiful environments, which is a big part of those games, tactical party-based combat and a real-time with pause combat system, and having a really cool reactive story that develops over the course of the game and companions that go with you and react to the choices that you make over the course of the game. Those were very core elements to the Infinity Engine games, to lesser or greater extents in all of them. And so those are the three things we've been focusing on.
So in this case, you wanted to recreate the feel of an Infinity Engine game, but without the baggage of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of ways, Dungeons and Dragons definitely inspired a lot of the choices that we made, but we did want to make our own setting, we wanted to make our own rule system, but when a person comes into it, we want it to have the feels. So when they boot it up and they start playing, they're like, oh yeah, this, it's new rules and things like that they have to learn, but it should feel like it falls in line with what they've experienced before.
Cool. Let's see some of the game.
All right, check it out. So what we're going to be looking at is the first few areas of the game. This is the intro of the game. The game is set in a new fantasy setting we're developing at Obsidian called Eora. And Eora is a big old world. The part of it that you're in right now is called the Eastern Reach. It's an area that's being heavily colonized. There are old ruins in it that a lot of people who are colonists like to explore and try to plunder. But that's very, very dangerous because the locals regard them as sacred and they will defend them, including killing people that go into the ruins. So your character can be from a number of different backgrounds, and you're part of a caravan that's traveling into the area. So character creation is once you sort of have the context for what you're going into, you can create your character. As in all the Infinity Engine games except for Planescape Torment, you can make a male or a female character. You can choose from many different races. During the Kickstarter campaign, they backed a total of 6. And then for classes, again, in the Kickstarter campaign, we started with 5. The backers wound up backing 11. So it's very comparable to a full D&D game.
So what were the ones that were added because of the backers here?
So we started with fighter, rogue, priest, and wizard. Fighter, rogue, priest, wizard, and ranger. And then everything else on that list was added by them.
So on the whole, the character creation feels very much like an Infinity Engine game. Mm-hmm. There's some nuance there, new things for experienced players to learn, but anyone who jumped in and played Baldur's Gate back in 2000 or whatever it was, they'll feel right at home.
Yeah, I mean, we want people to feel very comfortable jumping into it, but we want them to feel comfortable jumping into it even if they're new to these sort of games. Sure. So you notice, you do pick your class, you do pick your race, you do pick your attributes. You don't pick a ton of, if you're a wizard, you pick spells and things like that. But we wanted to make sure that at least when you're first making a character, there's not a lot of gotcha stuff where it's like, oh, I can't believe you made that choice right at character creation. Now your character's going to suck for the rest of the game. So we do believe that it has a lot of nice, cool stuff that feels like there's a lot of detail and a lot of depth in it. But it's something that if you're like, you know what, I never really played those games, I'd like to get into them, but I've never played D&D, you can still do that.
Okay.
So in the game, in the story itself, so once you start out in this caravan, Sodema says, yeah, we had to set this up because the tree got felled. We don't really have much option, but we have to wait for morning. But he says, do not wander around in this area. Like, we're really close to these ruins. The locals will kill you for going into them.
Might as well be telling me to go and do that.
Yeah, so, but he does tell you, he's like, you're looking a little sick. It looks like you have rumbling rot. I know how to make a remedy for that. I'm going to send someone to help you find the ingredients I need to make that. We're shopping with Hayden, the merchant in the camp. So even though you start with some gear based on your background and your class, you can choose to buy some additional gear. So in this case, I bought a pike and a battle axe, or rather Brandon bought a pike and a battle axe. So you can see all your characters' inventories on one screen. You can switch their equipment by switching between the different characters.
That's a nice change.
Yeah, we wanted it to feel, again, very like chunky and like it's made out of wood and metal and stuff like that, but also just be a little more flexible and less obtrusive in a lot of ways. To show a little bit of the combat here, it is a real-time with pause combat system. So right now, Kalisha is using her defender ability to try to hold a line and draw the wolves towards her. Even though she's being hit, she has a constant stamina recovery, so she can kind of weather that a little more easily. She also has her knockdown ability that she's going to try to... Ooh, she didn't knock... Oh, she got knocked down. So wolves can knock down as well. Right now, the barbarian is using a pike, so he's attacking from range from behind Kalisha. That helps protect him from damage. Did you blow it twice? Oh, no. Well, we took care of it anyway. Win some, you lose some. Knock down some, you don't.
It's not the prettiest win.
So we made it back to the camp, and now all these Glanfathans, these locals, they've slaughtered most of the camp. You can see everyone lying around dead. Boo-hoo. But they have one guy left.
No sympathy for the camp, man.
I've given this demo too many times.
Okay.
Boo-hoo. Your camp's dead.
Move on.
But one of the guys is still alive, which is Hayden. He's the merchant that sold you the stuff before. So the Glanfathan leader, the guy who's attacking the whole camp, he's saying, you guys better, you're trespassing, you better put down your arms or I'm going to kill this guy. So in this case, the Glanfathan leader decides to start a fight, and he does it by hitting your friend in the back with his axe. Doesn't kill him, but it does hurt him very severely.
Doesn't feel good.
No. So there he goes. He jacks up Hayden. But now Hayden is part of our party. Hayden is a rogue. They're very good at one-on-one damage. Not very strong. We're going to have the Barbarian Frenzy, and because he's in close range here, he can do a ton of damage to everyone in that area. Frenzy increases your rate of attack, which is... What's that?
Did the rogue just get knocked out?
No, I think he's okay. I don't have my glasses on, but I think he's doing okay. So you're able to overcome the attackers on the camp. The leader of the Glanfathans is not too phased, though, because he's pretty sure Divine Justice is coming for you. And that Divine Justice is coming in the form of what's called a Bioek. Bioek means soul wind, and as you can see, it is a wind that literally tears the souls out of people's bodies.
Oh, goodness.
Very, very dangerous, not something you want to stick around for. So the caravan master who's dying on the ground urges you to run inside for cover. So you start scrambling for the ruins, and on your way, Hayden, who's the guy you just rescued, he gets grabbed and pulled down by one of the dying Glanfathans. And depending on your equipment and your character class and things like that, you have different ways to try to get Hayden free from the circumstance. You can leave him, in which case he is left there to die. But you can also, in this case, choose to sacrifice one of your weapons to throw it at the Glanfathan and take him out so that Hayden can get free. So that does mean you actually do lose that weapon, but you do get Hayden in your party.
It's interesting, too, because you've set up these line art illustrations as cutscenes, but they're also cutscenes where I'm making cool decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's important.
It feels in a lot of ways like it's actually Dungeon Master explaining to me what's happening and giving me like
Yes,
choices.
that is very much like we really like this idea of these kind of esoteric, like, I do this really weird thing, or like I use a grappling hook to swing onto the whatever and blah, blah, blah. I want to climb up a wall. We didn't want to implement that all as systems, which is very, very expensive. And because this is more of a traditional style game, we decided to go with these scripted sequences, scripted interactions, because we can just describe it all through illustrations and text. So the way that our rest system works is, in the Infinity Engine games, typically in an area you either could rest or you couldn't. And if you could rest, often there were random encounters and it encouraged save scumming and stuff that's not very fun, and it's not that strategically interesting. So what we're doing in this game is we just have camping supplies. And there are some other games more recently that have done this as well, and it's a cool idea. What you do is you have a finite number of supplies that you can use. When you use them, that consumes one, and you can camp. You get all of your per rest abilities back, you remove all your long-term injuries, and you get all of your per rest abilities. Did I already say per rest abilities?
think so.
Anyway, you get all your stuff back.
Do you also still run the risk of being attacked in the middle of the night?
No, you don't. But you only can carry a certain number of camping supplies at a time.
So instead of putting in a risk reward mechanic, it's a resource to manage.
It's a resource to manage. It's more of a strategic thing.
Okay.
So in that way, we think it kind of encourages the players to like just monitor their character's health over time, monitor their per rest abilities, and then when they're like, oh, you know what, I'm getting kind of low, I really need to refresh, they can do it. So here I found an unlucky explorer.
I imagine it also kind of keeps the game pace up higher.
Yeah, it does.
Because it was really easy in Baldur's Gate to
very,
just
very easy.
rest and then move on to the next combat and then rest.
Yeah, we did not want to encourage ref spamming. We didn't want to encourage save spamming. We wanted to encourage people to treat their resources as things that were strategic. And we found in playtesting that that's what people do. They're like, holy crap, I can only rest twice more, and then I'm going to have to go all the way back to town before I can rest.
Right.
So like people tend to treat that very seriously, which is cool. So we finally found our way out of the ruins, and we'll see what's on the other side. Spoilers. It's something bad.
We're home free.
Yep.
Everything's fine.
For this. There you go.
Is that a soul wind windmill?
Who can
You're not
say?
gonna tell me.
Who can say? Who can say
So
what it is?
frustrating. Yeah, I mean, it looks great. It definitely has the feel of an Infinity Engine game, which is exactly what your Kickstarter backers
Thanks.
and other players wanted it to have.
Yeah, so hopefully people will enjoy it. We really try to capture that feeling, the look and the feel of how just everything came together, how characters move and they interact and stuff like that. So
Yeah, it's looking great. So
Thanks a lot.
when can we play this?
winter of this year.
Okay. And
Yeah,
you're
unless you're a
releasing-
backer.
Yeah,
In
or
which case,
wait.
August 18th of this year.
is when the backers get the beta, and then you're going to spend a lot of time listening to the backers and getting their feedback as well.
Yeah, of
is
course.
that something? It's not something that Obsidian's used to working with necessarily, like giving that unfinished product out, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, what's the best way of separating the noise of everybody just talking about the game?
I don't know. It's just the same as always. I mean, I've worked on a lot of games where we've worked on patches and balance patches and fixes and things like that. And it's just trying to you just read through, you pass over the stuff that is not really being contributing clear feedback, and just focus on the people that are trying to be really constructive. And I guess not to be too sensitive about it. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of these fans for 15 years now. Like, I mean, and when I say that, I mean literally these fans, like people that were on the Black Isle boards for Torment, for Icewind Dale, and stuff like that. So I'm pretty used to how they talk and how they express their ideas and stuff like that. So it's just kind of just focusing on the people who are trying to be constructive and give good feedback, and then just evaluating it seriously and going like, you know what, they're right about this stuff they're completely not right about, and then just making good decisions based on that you can't make everyone happy, but you can make smart decisions that makes the game better overall for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for showing Pillars of Eternity to us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Boy, I sure do love video games played on a personal computer. Oh man, quitting time.
Whenever you're ready.
Go for it. I'm good. Beautiful. Great.
Not the best clap. Everything this puppet says is like the word of God to me.
It's hilarious.
No one has suffered on this shoot more than Wes Fenlon. Okay, I can't take the Vault Boy trembling in fear.
Was it trembling?
You were like, oh, boo!
It's not holding it up. It's like holding it at.
You never
this
hear any of
angle.
Jim Henson's people complain.
Is my head in the shot right here? Yeah.